In 1954, a group of the most powerful men on the planet walked into a hotel in the Netherlands. The doors closed, the press was banned, and what was decided in that room quietly shaped the next 50 years of human history. That meeting still happens every single year, and you've never once seen it on the news. Nobody voted for them. Nobody elected them, and for most of the last 2 centuries, nobody even knew they existed. 4 groups, 200 years, every war, every financial crisis, every leader who seemed to come from nowhere, all connected by the same invisible thread, hiding in plain sight, in court documents, leaked guest lists, and the confession of one historian who was let inside and came back out with something to say. It started with a dying man's obsession. Cecil Rhodes, the diamond magnate who had an entire country named after him, wrote 7 wills across his lifetime. The first, drafted when he was just 24 years old, contained something extraordinary, a detailed plan for a secret society modeled on the Jesuits, funded by Rothschild money with one singular goal: to place the English-speaking world under unified elite control, and eventually the rest of it too. When Rhodes died in 1902, Lord Alfred Milner took over. He recruited young Oxford graduates, sharp, ambitious, completely loyal, and formed what would quietly become known as the Round Table. By 1909, the network was operational across Britain, Canada, Australia, and South Africa. They called their private meetings moots. They published an influential policy journal, and they embedded themselves into the highest levels of British government, just as the world was sliding toward the most destructive war in history. Carroll Quigley, a historian at Georgetown University who was given rare access to the group's private papers, documented how this Rhodes-Milner network extended its influence across the Atlantic, eventually spawning the Council on Foreign Relations in 1921 as its American parallel. Bill Clinton, a Rhodes scholar, called Quigley his mentor in his presidential acceptance speech. Quigley's reward for speaking openly? His publisher quietly pulled his 1,300-page book, Tragedy and Hope, from circulation. Used copies sold for hundreds of dollars on the black market for decades. The American Arm, Council on Foreign Relations. In September 1917, as World War I was grinding toward its bloody conclusion, President Woodrow Wilson assembled a group of 150 scholars in secret. Their mission? Design the post-war world before anyone else could. That group became the seed of what, 4 years later, was formally incorporated as the Council on Foreign Relations. During the Second World War, the CFR achieved much greater prominence within the State Department, establishing the strictly confidential War and Peace Studies program, funded entirely by the Rockefeller Foundation. Not the government, a private family foundation, funding the studies that shaped the architecture of the entire post-war world order. The CFR created local committees across the country to influence local leaders and shape public opinion, acting as useful listening posts through which the council and the U.S. government could sense the mood of the country. In plain language, a private organization funded by the wealthiest families in America with a nationwide network designed to align public opinion with its preferred outcomes before those outcomes were ever announced as policy. The names that flowed through CFR over the decades read like a complete map of American power: secretaries of state, CIA directors, Federal Reserve chairs, the editors of the most read newspapers in the country, and yet most people have never heard of it. The Tomb, Skull and Bones. Every spring at Yale University, 15 junior students receive a tap on the shoulder. That single gesture, almost theatrical in its simplicity, grants them entry into a brotherhood that has produced more concentrated power than almost any institution in American history. For nearly 200 years, Skull and Bones has inducted its elite group of 15 each year. Its members include 3 U.S. presidents, 3 Supreme Court justices, CIA directors, media moguls, and the founders of modern finance and warfare. 3 of them, William Howard Taft, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, became U.S. presidents. But the presidency is almost a footnote when you see the full picture. The same network produced Henry Stimson, who oversaw the Manhattan Project and authorized the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. It produced Henry Luce, who founded Time, Life, Fortune, and Sports Illustrated, effectively controlling what America read for most of the 20th century. It produced multiple directors of the CIA at a time when the agency was running covert operations on every continent. In the 2004 presidential election, both the Democratic and Republican nominees were members of Skull and Bones. When asked what it meant that both he and George W. Bush were bonesmen, former presidential candidate John Kerry said, "Not much, because it's a secret." Both candidates, one secret. America voted, but the handshake had already happened years earlier in a windowless brownstone building on a Connecticut campus. When journalist Alexandra Robbins persuaded over 100 members to break their vows of silence and speak with her, one furious bonesman called her and delivered a warning she recounts in her book. "There are a lot of us in journalism and political institutions across this country. Good luck with your career." She published the book anyway.
The annual meeting no one was supposed to know about, Bilderberg. In May 1954, a group of powerful figures slipped into a Dutch hotel in the quiet village of Oosterbeek. Journalists were not invited. Press releases were not issued. No votes were taken. No treaties signed. What they did was meet in secret, exchange candid views, and weave the networks that quietly shaped the direction of the West. After each conference, a private report of the meeting was circulated only to past and present participants, and in the report, speakers were identified only by their country. Not by name, by country. Even internally, they hid who said what. A former Bilderberg chairman hinted that the Bilderberg meetings facilitated the creation of the euro. Before their appointments, every president of the European Central Bank attended at least one Bilderberg conference. Bilderberg's treasurer effectively became the Eurozone's treasurer. Bill Clinton attended the meetings in 1991, before he was president. Tony Blair attended in 1993, before he became British Prime Minister. Pattern recognition isn't conspiracy theory, it's mathematics. And one of the group's own founding members eventually confirmed what critics had suspected for decades. Dennis Healy, who sat on the steering committee for 30 years, told The Guardian, "To say we were striving for a one-world government is exaggerated, but not wholly unfair. Those of us in Bilderberg felt we couldn't go on forever fighting one another for nothing and killing people and rendering millions homeless." He said it himself, in print, in a major newspaper. Almost nobody noticed.
Today, these networks didn't dissolve. They evolved. There's a revolving door between Bilderberg and NATO leadership. The current NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, appeared at many Bilderberg conferences before his appointment. A similar pattern appears between Bilderberg and the European Commission. The CFR still publishes the foreign policy journal that shapes Washington consensus. Skull and Bones still taps 15 students every spring. The Roundtable's direct descendants, Chatham House and the Rhodes Scholarship Network, still operate at the center of Anglo-American policy. What changed is that we can now see the connective tissue, the leaked guest lists, the archived wills, the historians who were let inside and came back out with something to say. The pattern that emerges isn't one of shadowy villains in a room pulling strings. It's something more unsettling than that. It's a world where the most consequential decisions about your economy, your wars, your news, and your leaders were shaped by people who knew each other, from a windowless room in New Haven, a locked hotel in the Swiss Alps, or a private dinner in New York, and who never had to answer to anyone outside that room. Here's the question worth sitting with. If these groups openly claim they shaped the Euro, NATO, and US foreign policy, and we have the documents, the guest lists, and even their own admissions, what exactly is it that still hasn't come out? Drop your answer below. The comment section belongs to you.